Most hill farmers, most crofters, they're primarily focused on livestock, so livestock like sheep, livestock like cattle. And so a lot of what we need to know collectively, not everybody, but at least have a good set of skills, is knowing about basic animal biology, animal nutrition, what type of feedstuffs does those sheep and cattle actually need in order to sort of be in good health and good welfare, and to actually be productive, to produce cows, to produce calves, to produce lambs, to go through the sort of the annual cycle. But also, those livestock don't just exist in isolation, they've got to eat something. So again, a lot of what we're also doing is looking at the sort of the soils where actually our animals are grazing, the grassland management for our actual livestock itself, trying to make sure that we're managing that environment just as well, ensuring that the grass can actually grow as good as it can, not just to actually have the animals eating that grass during most of the sort of the spring, summer and autumn, but also so as we can produce silage for our cattle during the winter. And that's, it sounds easy in principle, but it's not that easy in practice when you've got a relatively small amount of good quality grass. We've got 70 hectares of good quality grass and over 1,500 hectares of sort of moorland vegetation, upland sort of vegetation. But we're trying to actually marry those together, understand what the animals need, understand what the environment is actually providing for them, and actually manage the environment to benefit the actual animals themselves. But like Chris has also said, farming and farmers and their livestock don't exist in isolation from their environment. So when you go into the hills and uplands of Scotland, we have lots of habitats and species, wildlife that are actually of nature conservation value. So also a lot of what we are doing is looking at the ecology of the farms and trying to actually ensure that the type of management practices that we're advising the farmers to do are either sustainable into the sort of future, or even actually actively managing the environment so that it benefits the actual wildlife and the habitats that are actually out there. And there are actually schemes available from Scottish Government and others that actually reward farmers for actually managing the land on their farm to benefit the sort of ecology, to benefit the sort of wildlife. And also, I mean, just looking at what the sheep needs, or the cattle needs, or the soil needs, or the grass needs, is all very well, but we are actually looking at things in a round. We look at our farms as a systems type approach and work out, if we actually do this to actually improve the performance of the sheep, for example, what are the trade-offs, what are the benefits elsewhere on the farm, but also what might be some disbenefits elsewhere on the farm. We're trying to sort of work out what those trade-offs are and whether they're acceptable to us and whether they might be acceptable to farmers. So a lot of the sort of systems type approach, we're actually looking at the sort of the economics of the different choices, the different farm management practices, the cost of doing something, but the benefit of actually farmers doing that itself. And then a lot of what we're doing is the sort of soil management, the grassland management, the genetics of our sheep and our cattle. They are more sort of traditional, basic sort of skills that are still very, very important in that sort of rural environment. But we're also actually highlighting in recent years how using technology can really sort of benefit farmers in the sort of hills and uplands of Scotland and elsewhere. So I don't know how many of you have heard of the phrase precision agriculture, but when people talk about precision agriculture, they're largely in their heads. They've got somebody sitting on a tractor with little sort of cameras recognising the weeds in the crop that they're driving through and choosing which spray to actually kill those weeds for. But we are doing a lot of focus on what we call precision livestock farming. We think using technology is just as important, or even more important, in these extensive grazing systems across Scotland to actually help reduce labour costs, allow the farmers to actually concentrate their efforts much more on actually looking at their livestock or their grassland or their soils in a lot more detail, free up their time to be stock people again. So we're looking at where our skills involve a lot of sort of technology, so you can't necessarily see it very well there, but that's a conveyor, does exactly what it says in the tin. The animal steps onto it, there's two bands that basically just lift it off its feet and just move it slowly along on backwards as well. And that, who's worked with sheep in here? Anybody worked with sheep in here? A few of you. It's blooming hard. I'm going to say something else. It's blooming hard work. You know, they struggle. Whereas if you put them on that sort of conveyor, this is, you can't necessarily see, that's upside down, quite happy, quite comfortable on that conveyor. That's a vet who would otherwise be down like this, trying to actually hold a sheep and show the farmers the feet of the animal and how they can actually trim the feet properly, cut the toenails properly. That animal is comfortably there. The feet are all sticking up, the vet's stepping back, and you can't see it here. We've got 50 farmers standing there, seeing quite well what is actually happening, and he can actually explain to them what's actually going on. The technology here, this is a little sort of crate the animal walks into, it's automatically weighed, and on the basis of the computer that we program, we decide which animals we want split off. This machine, on its own volition, each animal comes in, the machine decides to send those animals one of 5 ways, depending on how we've actually programmed that. We can put 500 animals per hour through that bit of kit and have them split into 5 different groups that we can then say, these groups, the 30 animals in this group are all underweight, for example. How do we then feed them better to actually feed them differently than the rest to actually improve their sort of health and their performance? And everybody will recognise a drone, I'm sure, so there's a lot of work we're doing with drones, looking at how drones can be used to actually assess sort of weed occurrence in some of our in-by fields, or measure the extent of bracken, which is a weed that covers it's really covering the hills of Scotland and large parts of the UK. So lots of sort of engineering skills, technology sort of skills.